Hey everyone, this is your trainer from the Akron County Library from Electronic Service Division. In this segment, I'm going to talk about what is relative cells and what is absolute cell. To be able to explain that, I wanted to create a formula. So in the cell number F2, I wanted to find out the total cost for row number 2. How many bags of orange I buy according to the price here. So every formula begins with the equal sign. I'm going to start with the equal sign. I want to find out the total cost for this row number 2. That means quantity, cell number C2, multiplied by the price, cell number E2. Enter. I'm going to go back to that cell. I wanted to copy that formula all the way down. I can use this fill handle, which is this little square at the bottom right corner. I can simply double click that. By doing so, I got myself all the result. So 3 multiplied by 0.49 is 1.47, so on and so forth. Pay attention to the original formula. In this formula, it's cell C2 multiplied by E2. When you see a cell address without any other symbol or sign, that means that is a relative cell address. When relative cell address like this is copied into a next row, the cell reference change according to the relative position of rows and columns. So C2 multiply E2, when it copied to row 3, it becomes C3 multiply E3. When it is copied to row 4, it becomes C4 multiply E4. That is what does it mean by relative cell address. So if you wanted to copy a cell formula into the next row and next row and next row, and if you want to change the formula cell references according to the position of the rows and columns, you want to keep the cell address as a relative cell address. Next, I will explain to you what the absolute cell address is all about. There are times that you do not want a cell reference to change when filling the cells. Unlike the relative references, absolute references do not change when copied or filled. When you want to keep a row and/or column address constant, you have to use the absolute reference. Okay, let's use this example. Let's say I wanted to find out the 8% discount for all of those total costs in column F. I'm going to find out row by row. I'm going to start with row number 2. Again, formula begins with the equal sign, start with the equal sign, total cost, multiplication sign, and the cell number H1. I'm going to hit enter. This figure means if I give an 8% discount on this particular row, I may be giving about, let's say, 32 cents. If I copied it to the next row and the next row, let's give it a try by using the fill handle. I'm going to double click on it. Let's analyze that. The original formula is F2 multiply H1. Again, these are relative cell addresses. If I copy that to next row, it changed to F3. Yes, I do want to find out the total cost in F3, which is for apples, multiplied by the discount H1. But it changes to H2. Why? Because my original cell references are just relative. Nothing was absolute in there. So before I copy that, I should have changed the absolute cell address H1, the discount rate, to the absolute cell reference first before I copy that. Since I didn't do that, pay attention to the next row. F3 multiply H2. Next one, F4 multiply H3. I do want the column F to change from row after row. F2 become F3, F4, F5. I'm okay with that. But I do not want H1 to change at all. I want H1 to be constant. To do that is change the H1 cell reference from the relative cell address to absolute cell address. To do that, you click on the original cell, which is this one with the formula. I'm going to click inside the formula bar. My cursor is blinking right behind the H1 cell address, then I'm going to use the function key F4. I'm going to use the F4 function key right there. I'm going to hit that on my keyboard. By doing so, my relative cell address H1 turn into the absolute cell address. Absolute cell address has some dollar sign before the column name, dollar sign before the column one. I'm sorry, row number one. Now I'm done with that. I'm going to hit the enter button. Let's go back to that cell. Now use the fill handler to copy that. I'm going to double click that. Now let's analyze that. Original formula, F2 multiply absolute H1. If I copy it to the next one, F3 multiply absolute H1. F4 multiply absolute H1. So H1, the absolute cell reference, follows you how many rows you copy your original formula. That is the difference between the relative cell address and absolute cell address. So bottom line is, before you copy the formula, if you want to change the cell references relative to the position of the row or the column, leave it as the relative cell address. Just like in this example, I want F2 to change F3, so I leave it before I copy it as F2. But I do want H1 to follow and stay constant. So before I copy it, I change H1 relative cell address to the absolute cell address. Then I copy it, so H1 follows. So that's the difference between relative cell address and absolute cell address. This training is brought to you by the Akron Summit County Library from Electronic Service Division. Thank you for watching.